Everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast. I'll call it Blind Spots because that's a lot shorter. So, I want to tell you real quick what this podcast is all about first. So, for those listening in for the first time and those who've been here for a number of times, I'd love for you to understand what you should expect to get out of this. For me, the greatest leaders are the ones who are always looking for the narratives, the stories that are emerging in the organization. And then once they understand it, they can start to control it. I call it the fairy tale ending. They can shape their story to get the fairy tale ending. I bring people onto this podcast so that they can start to see some of these narratives, these stories that others have seen, that others have heard. So they can start to say, aha, that's actually happening for me as well. So you can control your own ending. This is interactive. This is live. So we're publishing on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn Live. So if anybody's listening in, feel free to ask comments throughout the course of this. I've got Josh online with me. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
Hey, how are you doing? I'm doing really well.
Good. So throughout the course of this, if you're listening in, please feel free to comment. Ask questions of Josh or I. I will tell you it makes the conversation even more interesting. Don't hesitate. In the meanwhile, if you are listening in, please tell us where you're connecting in from. I'd love to see.
I'd love to see too, so please be sure to hit it up because I got this cool little bar I can see everything.
That's right. We see that, and we will change kind of the way we talk with you and the questions that we answer throughout the courses. So make sure you keep it interactive and answering questions for you. Let me tell you a little bit about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks, and I want to kind of tell you a little more about Josh in a second here. So July 29th, I've got Megan Keenan, Plan, Protect, and Prosper, the need for workplace security. There's a lot more conversations these days around security in workplaces. Megan's going to come in and tell us a little more about that. What does she see and how she's seen it? Has the world changed, and what do you need to know? On July 27th, I've got Tina Cantrell. Tina is just a fabulous person to converse with. She's going to talk about maximizing company performance with a cultural lens. How do you use culture to unlock the superpower within your company? On July 22nd, I'm talking to Jody Wolkerling, the resilient organization. Why does it matter? So companies, organizations start to get into a pattern. Think about Sears. Sears was a fabulous company for a long time. It just couldn't adapt as new companies came to bear. And nobody knows about Sears anymore. So Jody's going to tell us a little bit about how you can start to be resilient as an organization and change. But today, I got Josh Bolton. And the topic of our podcast is developing and trusting your own leadership awareness. Josh, would you agree that there's a lot of talk, a lot of conversations, a lot of side stream conversations about awareness and people who are quote unquote woke these days? Have you been starting to hear a lot more of that yourself?
Yes and no. Yes, in that some of the social justice calls are needed, but no, in that it's not in the toxic woke way, like the Twitter mobs, at least.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about Josh real quick, just so you kind of see who I've invited to the show and why I'm so excited. So Josh actually runs a podcast. That's actually how I found out about him, called the Josh Bolton Show, where he talks about mindset, motivation, and the philosophy of businesses, from everything from the small companies all the way up to the large corporations. As he calls it, trials and tribulations of being an entrepreneur, being the CEO of these companies, and the tricks and tips for those future events that are coming at you, and how to be prepared for that. And what I love about Josh is really just kind of in his podcast, he kind of starts to go deeper into the details. You know, one of the things I loved in his bio, in his about section, he says his grandfather told him to always ask the question whether it's going to be a good answer or a bad one. Ask the question that nobody else wants to ask, because that's probably really the question that needs to be asked.
It does.
I really like that, and I aspire to be the same way. Josh, did I do a fair job of kind of painting a picture of who you are and kind of what makes Josh Bolton tick?
Not tick. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. But yeah, that's exactly how it works. Yeah.
So tell me a little more. Let's start off first with your podcast. I mean, you've been doing this for some time. You've had some really interesting people on there. Uh, why did you start the podcast, and what are sort of the message that you're starting to come out throughout the course of it?
So I actually wanted to start this like 4 years ago, but I was super scared of the Twitter mobs. I'm like, oh, they're gonna take my job away and they're gonna tweet and it's done. Now I realize I'm like, oh wait, that's free press. Like, please tweet, yeah, let me kind of thing. Make sure you say my name correctly. But yeah, that was the only reason. I love talking to people, even though I'm a super introverted person. I love talking to people. It's like that weird paradox. Um, and I mean, even as a kid, with my grandfather, the he was an army vet. He never actually went in the field, but he did track and field for the army. I guess there's still a position for that for the soldiers. But he pretty much, as he's raising me, we would camp, we would hike, we would. As a young kid, he properly taught me, because I was a brute even as a young kid, and taught me how to properly chop wood. And it's just one of those. I've always at a young age had a good work ethic. I didn't realize he was thinking blue collar, but it was really he was teaching the beginnings of an entrepreneurship. He started me on a mowing business, and it was just more like he didn't want to mow. He was getting too old, so he's like, $20 a week. Can you just mow my lawn, kind of thing. He's like, I'll have the mower, the gas, etc. You mow, and that's when it hit me. I'm like, well, if I get the neighbor whose lawn's shaggy, I can get another $20 a week, and if I get that person, and it was growing. But California, the heat being insane here, at certain point, just called all my clients and said, "Here's a good guy. I can't do this heat anymore."
Well, I there's a couple of things I want to unpack in there, and anybody who's listening in, I'd love to hear if there was someone in your life. It sounds like, yeah, Josh, your grandfather, who
Mhm.
kind of really is a foundation for a lot of your own growth from an early age. Anybody who's listening in, was there somebody who kind of started you on this journey, or someone who may not have been at the very beginning, may have been somewhere along the way, a boss, a friend, a mentor, a colleague, a relative, who kind of started in your journey? I'd love to hear who that was and who how what they did for you. But the first thing I heard out of this was the introvert that loves people. I took a Myers-Briggs type indicator test a number of times, and it actually tells me that I am an extrovert, but I'm the closest thing to an introvert that an extrovert can be. And people laugh at me all the time because I'm always making jokes, laughing with people. And what I found is that an introvert, the difference between an extrovert, at least when I did a deeper dive into what that means, is an extrovert is somebody who draws energy from others' thoughts. An introvert is one who draws energy from their own thoughts.
Yeah,
The point being is that while I'm an extrovert, I got to have my time to myself, where I sit down and just am able to process. And lots of times I find myself binge watching. I don't even really remember what I'm watching. It's just
right.
2 o'clock in the morning. I'm just going through all the thoughts of the day and kind of connecting the dots. And I don't think that fast, so it takes a little while sometimes,
Yeah,
but eventually comes together. So the fact that you said you love people, but you're an introvert, I'm constantly learning from others. So the fact that you do a podcast actually completely resonates with me.
oh yeah, yeah. And by the way, your show is absolutely brilliant. I've was listening to at least 6 of your episodes, and it was just one of those. Some of them, like, wow, like your storytelling to kids of going up the mountain. I was like, whether you're complaining or not, you're going up the mountain, kind of thing. Might as well enjoy it.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that one up. I find so many people, as a personal passion of mine, is just this idea that when I always love to learn from others, just kind of like you. And
Hmm.
so many people talk about this, gosh, my life is a slog. It sucks, yada, yada, yada. I say, well, you spend most of your life working and with people who are not part of your family. Why would you allow yourself to hate it? And the point is that it's a choice. You can smile or you can frown, but it's the same slog either way, right?
Either way,
So tell me more about you in this podcast. I mean, you've had some interesting guests. You've had some interesting insights. I've listened to a number of yours as well. What are the things that have? What are the first? Tell me a couple of things that came up for you in terms of running companies, leading companies. What are the things that have stood out in your mind that you've come away with as core messages?
The biggest one is, it's something I've always noticed, but I couldn't put it into proper words, is the old school 1930s factory line where it's, you are a gear to, you are not allowed to have an opinion, you do what we say. But now that we have technology that can alleviate the mundane, we are now in more of a creative state. The old dogma of keep your head down, grind, do what you're told is actually kind of going out of fashion. And if you keep this mindset up, it's actually going to destroy your business.
Wow, so that's really interesting because just yesterday I had a conversation with a lady named Barbara, and she has been coming into companies for 40 some odd years now, just helping them organize and declutter. And declutter is
Mhm.
not about getting stuff off the floor and the shelves and stuff. It's really how do you access information within your company?
Right.
And she said, since she's been doing it for some time, she talked about this idea that it used to be that executives and companies tended to have executive assistants who used to take stuff off of their plate and get those little things done because there's 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 15 minutes there.
Mhm.
But with the onset of computers, oh, we don't need that person anymore. That's a role we don't need anymore. We'll just get, the computer will do it. But because of the automation, there's more time to think. And I'm kind of curious if you see an intersection between what that sort of that dynamic there and this idea that we've got this more creative capability. Do you see an intersection between those two things? Do you think they influence each other?
Yes. No, they absolutely do. And most of the people I've interviewed, um, actually, I just now realized the caliber of the person I interviewed afterwards. Stefan, he's part of a publicly traded money management firm, and that is the biggest one he was even talking about. Is like, there's, especially with COVID, there are huge trends that are kicking in that would have normally taken 5 to 8 years. And I'm like, yeah, the whole everything online, school's online. I'm like, school probably never would have gone online, but because of COVID, it's introduced it now. But I said, yeah, he even said it's a lot of the technology has alleviated burdens, but it's also caused problems because now there are people unemployed, kind of thing. Which he's like, for the business, that's good. For society, that's bad.
Wait, walk me through that one more time. You're saying that because things have moved online, for society is bad, but for business it's good. And that's just purely out of the fact that business is easier to transact business, but as a society, we don't get to talk to each other. Am I reading that right?
Pretty much, yeah. Because it's the low over cost. I mean, to buy a Zoom, it was like $120 for me for the whole year, and you don't have to now pay your employees. They are now, well, okay, you have to pay their wage no matter what and their insurance, but like, you don't have to. What things some employees don't realize is there's the insurance cost, the rent cost, the overhead utilities. It's like, if they're at home, they have to cover that themselves. Which that right there saves so much money for businesses in general. But it's an unseen cost for the employee and public.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read I want to say, I think it was a Goldman Sachs report back in 2000, and they were putting out I think it was Goldman Sachs, that they predicted what's going to happen over the next 50 years, and that's when I think that might be where the idea of the gig economy was born, and they
Yeah.
talked about this increasing shift to the financial burden to people, and I think that's exactly what you're saying here, right? That financial burden it was something, long time ago. Healthcare costs and pensions and all these and all that kind of stuff was borne by the company, and
Right.
increasingly less and less of that is covered by companies, and it's being pushed to someone else to figure that out for themselves, which um, I don't know, there's a good side and a bad side to that. um,
Right. There is. And there's not really clear right answer either. Because, like me and the Stefan were talking about, for business, for the shareholders, this looks great. This is wonderful. But the morale of the employees is going down. The finances, like, I mentioned it to him. I'm like, in general, the minimum wage has not been increased for, I think it was like 15, 20 years, which in theory with inflation, we're actually being paid less now than they were in the 70s, kind of thing.
wow. Uh, So this is interesting. Shifting the cost to the employees is good on the balance sheet.
Right.
It's good on the prospectus, but it is directly affecting the the
The
retention and
employee.
loyalty of those employees because they just can't make things work anymore.
Right.
So this is interesting because as my company, we focus on this idea of employee retention and productivity and engagement and loyalty.
Hmm.
Um, and it's interesting because what you're saying here is that as these things have been shifting to virtual, yeah, great, it looks good on the numbers, but for every push there's a pull, right? And
Right.
that's where it's happening on the employee side. And I hadn't been smart to make that connection until just now. So thank you for opening
You're
my
welcome.
eyes.
Pleasure to be assistance.
uh, wow, that's a good connection there. So Josh, if you don't know it, I've already gotten 4 blind spots. That's number 4 right there. So
Really?
yeah, I'm learning stuff as I'm talking to you here.
That's wonderful.
What else did you get? What are the other messages that you've seen about companies and what they've done, what they've learned, what you've learned?
So actually, I just had a guest on. I believe he's John. No, Joseph. Joseph. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm not going to try. We were talking about AI,
Mhm.
same tie-in, and diversity, and it was one of those. At a certain point, as we're talking, he's talking about BLM, Asian communities, women's right, this and that, and I'm like, that's great. They're all good buzzwords. They're all important things. But I'm like, what about the blind, the deaf, the autistic? If we're going for true diversity, what about that group? They're not subjected. They're not their own compartment. That affects all communities, all walks of lives. Like, are we just going to ignore them, kind of thing? And he's like, you're the only one that saw that. I'm like, if we're saying that we need to be diverse, great. Now, how do you incorporate that group?
Uh, yeah, really interesting topic for me here. So part of what I do in my company is start to show them where their blind spots are. And if we start to see through the data that their employees in a particular role, for example, continue to fail in the same way, well, then we've just identified that there's no diversity and it's hurting them, right? I can
Mm-hmm.
put a financial metric on that. And the question that comes, for me personally, or at least what I'm doing in my company, I'm bringing a lot more women into the company just because, guess what? A bunch of guys think of a very similar way.
Oh yeah.
That's right. So by having women kind of saying, let's pump the brakes for a second, Vinay, you're being a guy again, right? That is my strength. That's also my fault. Right?
Yeah.
But you bring up a good point. That's only just one layer of diversity, right? Uh, look, being from of an Indian origin, Asian Indian origin, I'm going to bring some diversity and difference in my perspective compared to someone else who was born and brought up in the United States, for example. Right? There's just a
Right.
difference of culture, religion, food, all that kind of stuff. But I might push. How would you actually see that makes a difference? Did he offer any kind of ideas, or do you have any theories on how that actually changes things?
No, this is exactly why I brought it up, because he said this is the biggest blind spot that all businesses face. He's like, if you have a man of color, be like black, Latino, Mexican, Asian, he's like, whatever you, he's like, if you could afford it, get all of them, then get the female version. And then he's like, then you literally have all angles covered. There are no blind spots. He's like, there is there are people going, he's like, yes, there might be more quarreling amongst each other, but he's like, it's a healthy core, like arguing amongst each other, because they're wanting change, they're wanting betterment for the company. And he's like, you will hear so many perspectives that you almost can't miss anymore. If you do, it's more likely just the one swinging.
And what this really requires is that someone really level up their game. I will tell you for the longest time, I'm the biggest offender of this. Is if I there was a saying that goes, or quote says, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go long, go with others.
And that's
Uh,
exactly what he was saying too.
yeah, this is going to force you to change your mindset, right? Your belief system. because if you're those blind spots are going to come and bite you in the ass. That's a fact
Oh,
of the matter.
100%.
It's just a matter of time. But if you've got diversity, the less chance that you'll have a blind spot that's going to come and bite you, right? So
Hmm.
the less of a diversity blind spot you have, the less of a blind spot you have as a company, right?
Right. Yeah, he was also mentioning, he's like, statistically, he's like, let's use banks because stereotypically most people work at the banks are white. So he's like, we don't, there's not going to be any arguments with that. He's like, how many people of color are actually brilliant mathematicians, but they can't get in because stereotypically it's a white person?
Hmm.
And I'm like, tons. I know a lot of people of color are genius in math. I suck, can barely do visual math, like 2 plus 2, only through repetition I know it's 4, kind of thing. And that's where
Hmm.
he's like, imagine, instead of paying the $200,000 for the white guy, same guy, $100,000, not because he's black, Asian, whatever. He's like, because it's new blood in the system. You like, everyone knows when you're new blood, your price lowers. He's like, imagine same quality or even better for less price, but you had to go beyond your comfort zone. And I'm like, why don't people do that at all? I'm like, that actually makes so much sense. Get as much new blood in as possible. I mean, obviously, you got to keep your, like, the old guard, certain things you have to keep. But yeah, and he said it's a comfort. It's a thing in the human psychology that we want people like ourselves. If he's like, but if you start off already a rainbow, well, then you'll just be like, maybe we need a little more citrus, kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I've often thought for a long time diversity is actually a superpower, not a checkbox, right? It's not something you
100%
just got to
is.
say. Yeah, this is interesting. There's a service and virtual assistant service that I've been using for probably the better part of 9 years now, uh,
Mhm.
and I will likely never meet the people that I've met through that. But there have been some of the hardest workers, most dedicated, most loyal people that I've ever worked with, and I've
Mhm.
met them completely online. And the beautiful thing is, yeah, sure, I pay a lot less. That's for sure. Um, but so there's a real benefit there. But they also just see the world in a completely different perspective. I have one team member who actually runs all my podcasts for me.
She's
She
freaking awesome.
what's that?
She's freaking awesome.
Oh, Janine is fabulous.
Oh
I
yeah.
will agree, and she is just one example of a number of people that I have that I think are fabulous on my team. Uh, I just remember the other day she came to me and said, "Hey, I've got this idea of, and we're going to start having more projects here. I think we need to implement a project management system." And I hear this from her, and I go, well, "Hold on a second. She's probably half. I don't know if she's even half my age actually. She's much younger than me, and I just had a conversation about how we need to have a project management system to start scaling our company, and she is already thinking like that. I was like, first of all, half my age." She is never going to meet me, but she's already ahead of me in the way she
Hmm.
thinks. Gosh, how smart did I feel that day for hiring her?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. When you go to her check, it's like an extra $100. Like, that was brilliant. Here, get the stuff done.
yeah. She and a number of others in the company are always pulling me forward, which is fabulous. Um, so what do you think? This, I mean, there's a lot of buzz around this diversity, equity, and inclusion. What do you? I mean, there is it a lot of chaff or is there a lot of wheat to it? Does that make sense?
Right. It's like the question when we first started the woke society. This is some of the. It's, you have to do it now. If you don't do this, in 5 to 10 years, your business will die. Like, there is no saving it. You have to do this now. Yes, there's the good cause of we're getting other people involved, but like he was telling me, he's like, his statistic, he helps with like a hospital. He said he talked to the not the CEO, but like the president or something, maybe like the overseer manager, and he essentially said she realized real quick most of their nurses are of the Latino and Black community.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I thought it was the Philippines. He's like, this one specifically was Black and Latino, but yeah, mostly Black, Latino, Philippines in general. And he's like, but they were hiring the wrong type. So she realized real quick, cancel that, and they only hire that group now
Hmm.
because they are the hardest working. They have They want to go from wherever up, and they know by being a nurse or a doctor, they can achieve their goal of leaving the race, the rat race kind of thing.
This is interesting. I just actually, I was talking to someone else who I'm going to be bringing onto my podcast just before you and I started talking.
Wonderful.
He's been in the pest control industry, which is the industry that our company is so heavily focused on right now. And he's been in the industry for some time, and I put out the statement that I love using, and I still, because I think it just works over and over again. That is, I can pay people for their minds, but if I get their hearts, I win. And I think
Absolutely.
that's what I'm hearing from you here, right? Is you're this lady who runs this hospital started to realize, let me get the people who've got their heart. Doing this role gets them to where they want to go, which gets me where I want to go. Both parties win. Is it? Did I hear that right?
100%.
So DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is about a superpower. Is about unlocking a superpower, not
Right.
not just something you ought to think about.
Exactly. And the thing the guest was talking, Joseph was telling me, he's like, when you can achieve it and you have multiple perspectives and positions, power, supervisor, manager, whatever, he's like, you will also be getting multiple points of views. He's like, if you want to really think about it, you get multiple little caches of data that you can track. And then I told him, like, yeah, I'm a very logical person. I just tell you, like, hey, the warehouse workers are really like, the morale doesn't exist anymore. We need to do something about it. And he's like, but if someone was more focused on making him happy, would never tell him that. I'm like, then I want the other guy. He's like, there you go, diversity. I'm like, oh, he's like, it's also mine. He's like, this is the part people don't catch. The way you think is also diversity.
Yeah, and by bringing people from different backgrounds, you're kind of hedging your bets by bringing different types of thinking.
Yeah, becomes kind of the law of large numbers. Big enough, it doesn't really. You just see it all happening. You're like, perfect, fix this section.
So let's just assume for a moment. I think the law of large numbers. Everyone gets the phrase, has heard the phrase. Tell me more about how you think about the law of large numbers and kind of how that applies here, or why you think it applies here.
Well, if we're going it from the perspective and data, like you would, is the more data or the more numbers you can get, the more you can distill and simplify it. If you have a very itty bitty small pool, let's say like only 10 employees out of the 1,000, well, they could be intentionally brown nosing. Then they'll never tell you anything that's wrong. But if you get everyone, there's going to be a lot of people that are just going to be like, well, I'll just use myself as example. Josh is an asshole as a manager. Like, he gets shit done, but it's like he doesn't like focus on us. He doesn't help us, kind of thing. Well, if you had that little pool of 10, you'll never see that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So it's like, even if it's a simple survey, an anonymous, you just be like, free for all. If you want to cuss me out, go for it, kind of thing. But tell me exactly what's happening. That right there, that much data, that's a lot. Then you can realize, oh, wow, I didn't realize for pest control. Let's say Johnny, he goes to this one client, but they talk his ear off. He wants to keep working, but he also wants customer service kind of thing. So if it's like if we can get him assistant to literally just alleviate him from the problem, then we can get a lot more done. But if that's just one point of view, you'll never see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really important thing too, right? I mean, how broad is your understanding of perspectives, right? If you look at one perspective, you can only see this much, right? But if you open up your perspective, you see a whole heck of a lot more, and you're much more informed in terms of how to make a good, solid decision.
Right.
So, I mean, we built this podcast, or we kind of named this the topic of this podcast, this idea of owning your leadership awareness, and I think we've talked about a couple of things here, right? About this idea of you are a gear in the system is sort of this old thinking. You got to shift that mindset, and being aware of that as a leader is one of the things that I've written down here, right?
Mm-hmm.
This idea that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a superpower to be unlocked is another one. What are the other things that you think an aware leader should be aware of?
It's actually kind of touching on to that. It's something you do, as we've talked before, is you just hire smart people and let them do their thing. If this building's on fire, then obviously call me. We could put that problem out, kind of thing. But you be you, just go for it. And that's actually the most. That's the biggest thing I'm seeing is when you can get people. Because I'm listening to the book, "What Is Your Why" by Simon Sinek,
Mhm.
and I realized that is it's just any company now. You got to have that, but you also have to have multiple people. And it's the hardest part as a leader is you have to just put your hands up politely and be like, all right, just send me some reports if something's going wrong, kind of thing. And just
So, do you have any insights or thoughts from what you've heard or what you've thought in terms of how do you get those? Excuse me, to get those right people, because you got to get the right people on the bus, right? And you go in the right direction.
100%.
What do you what do you think?
Well, it depends. If you're beginning at, like, if someone's starting right now a new batch, and you're applying for the like job boards like LinkedIn, Monster, etc., be very specific on what you're looking for. Because if you say, "Oh, we want a motivated hustler, willing to work extra hours," that's anyone that has a pulse, kind of thing. You want specifically, shit can get hard. Well, you wouldn't say that on a thing, but it's like stuff can get hard. We might ask you to work a little longer. Um, it's a little rough. We're a new startup, but once you get established, like there's truly room to grow. Well, I would read that and I'd be like, done, kind of thing, because I want to grow in a business. I don't want to be stuck scrubbing toilets, kind of thing.
Yeah. I actually just put I told you about that the virtual assistant service that I use. I'm
Mhm.
used it to everything from uh, developers, code developers to executive assistants to
Mhm.
podcast managers, right? So I've used it for a lot of different things, video editors, so on and so forth. And most recently, it's probably been 3 weeks ago now that I put out a post called "The World's Best Executive Assistant, comma ever," right?
Right.
Uh, and usually I get about 4 or 5 people that will respond to posts. This one I got 78. And I was trying to understand, well, first of all, I'd love for people, droves of people to come out. And I started asking everyone, so why did you respond to this post? And one of the things I led with is my core values, and I asked them which ones matter to them and why. I also said, look, I don't want a copy of me because another good word I learned instead of cultural fit, I'm looking for cultural add. I'm looking for somebody who's going to amplify my capabilities, not just do me.
Right.
And I will show you everything that I know to get you there because you're just making me better. And it seems
Right.
so incredibly transparent and honest, but that's what everyone responded saying, yeah, that's exactly why I responded. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing here, right? Just lean into the role and say, look, I want to help you become good because I get good because of it. Does that sound fair?
Pretty much. And what you did on your post is what I read just now in the book was you led with your why, your core values of your company, what you're going for. And that's the biggest thing Simon says. He's like, it doesn't matter if it's could be an air quote terrible job. As long as you lead with the why and they align with it, they don't care. Because they feel now they are more invested than you and they will put in the extra time. They'll work off the clock, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny in the conversations that I have with everyone. I am I feel like this is the taboo conversation that you're not supposed to have, but I've just started to have it. And that is when people come on board to the company, I say, look, if I'm really successful in this role, you absolutely love what you do, and I get out of the way and I fold my fingers behind my head and I lean back in my chair with my feet up on my desk. If I'm doing a really good job, I don't have to do any work because you love what you do. And I feel like you're not supposed to say that.
No,
But
that's actually, people love that. And Ravi, yes, I 100% agree with your comment.
oh, Ravi, yeah, Ravi. I didn't see that. Ravi, thanks for chiming in. Ravi's a fabulous guy. He does a lot of coaching for executives, so he gets this.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Look, I don't. I tell my kids 1 plus 1 is not always equal to 2. Sometimes 1 plus 1 equals 50, and I'm looking for the people who are the other one that make me 50,
Oh, 100%.
and
Yeah.
we go faster together. So hire smart people and you will go in the right direction, but be specific in what your posts are. Be specific in what help you need is kind of what I heard from you, right?
100%. And like one of my guests, I actually laughed at it, and then, but it was brilliant. He said he had this whole list, perfect, explaining his why, the what, and how. But like halfway in the middle, he wrote because he was wanting a person that's very that can follow the rules. Because he's like, I hired a bunch of rebels, that's fine. He's like, I don't need them anymore. He's like, well, I do, but I don't. He's like, I specifically wrote, don't bring me your resume, bring me a printed picture of your favorite cat. And I'm like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, like 20 showed up with the resume. He's like, only 2 showed up with a picture of a cat. I was only hiring 1, so I hired both of them instead.
Yeah, that's funny. I One of the things that I always do in my posts is I say which one of the core values resonate most with you and why, right?
Hmm.
Open ended question. And I will tell you, 80% of people just respond with, here's my resume, here's my background. And I look, there's no response to that question. That's an easy peasy one to just kind of like,
Right.
I don't want that one.
Yeah, it's like filter out. I'm done. No.
Yeah, that you just made it easy for me. So be specific, be specific in what help you need and how they fit into the. I think I heard how they fit into the organization as well, right?
Right.
What else? I'm Josh Bolton is dropping lots of knowledge on me, and I'm getting all these nuggets down. So I'm processing as fast as I can and writing. Drop some more knowledge on me. What
All
are the
right.
other things you're learning?
Other things I'm learning. It's more the overarching trend. So you're everyone says it, but they don't fully define it. It's like your company has to have a mission, but a purpose too. So one of the biggest things the guest told me is like if you're going to say like Toms, like everyone knows Toms. You buy a pair of shoes, yes, they're expensive, but they give a pair of shoes to someone. He's like same with Bombas. Buy a pair, yes, it's expensive, but you're paying for the second pair. And people, that's what they want. They're like, okay, I don't want just a transaction anymore. It's like, yes, it's nice. I can buy it for cheap, but how far much farther can my dollar go to help people? Kind of thing. And so it's like I told him like, okay, what if it's like you buy a bottle of water and after so many sales, like I actually go dig a well, hire a crew and dig a well for like someone. And he's like, 100%. And he's like, and because they know you're digging a well and it's not cheap, you can charge a little extra for that. Because there's a mission, there's a why, there's a cause for it. And I just sat there and I'm like, interesting. He's like, so whatever it is you do, he's like, obviously you're gonna have to like prove you do it. So like you're gonna have to show a video for those who are gonna want it. But he's like, that is the biggest rallying point people are wanting now. They don't like they're like, we all know Walmart and Amazon. Like we can get anything for cheap there. Pretty much anything too. It's like, what can I do to help my fellow humans? And he's like, that's now the new trend he sees coming.
Hmm. I'm curious, Ravi. You worked with lots of leadership in large companies. I'm kind of curious if you're seeing this trend as well from your point of view, and any others who are listening in. I'd love to hear from you. Are you seeing this trend as well that companies have to have a mission, but also a purpose that people can buy into? Um, Josh, what I'm hearing as I heard that from you is, I mean, I think Apple is probably the most might be the most recognizable in doing this.
Right.
Uh, Apple is ultimately a computer company, but I don't think people kind of feel a little funny when you say that they're not a computer company. Yes, they are. That's all
They
they do.
start Well, they started as a computer company, but even Jobs realized at a certain point we'll be limited to market. We'll be like Dell. So we are a innovator of the industry,
That's
whatever
right.
the industry is.
Yeah, they're more an emotion that you buy into. It's part of a club or country club that you become
Yeah,
a member of, not a piece of hardware, which
exactly.
is where some of the other people, uh, some of the other companies live from. And hey, look, there's a time and the space for it. But there was a book called Blue Ocean Strategy um, a long time ago. I want to say it was in the early '90s, and it talked about how in a blue ocean you're constantly innovating and you're leading the pack. In the red ocean, everyone there's chum in the water and everyone's fighting each other, which seems like Samsung and Nokia and Microsoft and LG and all those companies that are just constantly
Hmm.
Motorola, they're all fighting with each other. While meanwhile, Apple's continuing to press forward.
Well, the
Go ahead.
biggest one from Simon Sinek's why is they're treating their products like a commodity. So in treating it like a commodity, well, you're going to keep undercutting yourself to be the one with the higher, faster, but cheaper product. And that's where he's like, have you noticed well, this is me paraphrasing for him. Have you noticed Apple's price keeps going up, kind of thing, compared to
Yeah.
the others are going down because they know what they're doing. They have a flag. They're standing behind it.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing because look, having grown up as a Microsoft engineer, as in having built lots of solutions and developed lots of solutions on Microsoft platforms, used to always use PCs, and I couldn't understand why people loved Apple so much because honestly, it was a pain in the ass to use
It still
Microsoft
is.
products on Apple, right? Yeah, it still is. Yet people swear by them, and they'll pay 4 times as much for this computer with the same exact processor and RAM and everything else. Displays pretty much the same thing, but they'll pay 4 times as more, and will swear by it.
Yeah,
And as soon as Chromebooks came out, Windows market share kind of started to drop pretty significantly because they were just looking for a better, cheaper solution. So
100%.
so don't treat your product like a commodity is what I get out of that.
Right. And from our meeting before, like when you were showing me your product and the charts, I could tell this was quality. This was not something I just pay like $1,000 for the year and just if it's nice, I buy it again. This is something like I realized as a person watching, but also you explaining, you're going to add more layers. You're going to add more this. So it's like might as well be like a semi early adopter and then just get it locked in on a nice price. So later on, when everyone's wanting it and it's 5 times the price, I'm still locked in at 1,000 kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, sort of the thought process that keeps going through my mind is that early adopter loyalty is so valuable to me.
Oh, it is.
Gosh, I mean, the problems that I'm going to continue to solve in the future, as in terms of employee retention and engagement, and trying to measure productivity and how much is pushing your employees too hard. Solving those problems, getting your employees and people to love you. I'm going to solve those for problems for the people who are on board with us first, and I think that's the opposite of treating it like a commodity, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it's we're feeling their pain alongside of them, and I think
Whether
there's real value there.
100%. I would say whether you realized it or not, you did exactly what we were just talking about, where you realize the value. You're not looking for everyone like Apple. You're looking to bring so much value to like the select group or whatever that intrinsically they'll all just talk to each other and be like, dude, if you don't have this, you're like, you got to get them while you can.
Yeah, well, that's the goal. if they if they don't if the light bulb hasn't gone off, please talk to someone else, and hopefully the light bulb will go off. And if not, that's perfectly fine as well, right?
Right. But the reason I bring it up again is the way you displayed it. The first thing I thought of wasn't just pest control, was warehouses.
Hmm.
If you, I want to say, are you looking into getting into warehouse stuff?
There's actually a guy. I had a guy named Chuck that I talked to a couple weeks ago. He does warehouse management solutions, and he said, "Vinay, I've got all the data behind this stuff. We can tell they're doing things where they help warehouses manage pallets and do partial
Right.
pallets, right? Partial pallets of packing, which he said is where a lot of the errors and challenges start to occur.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if there was a way you could start to tell me who are the employees and the people, the workers, technicians, whatever the case may be, who are doing really good jobs, and what are the behaviors that they exhibit that tend to be really effective, you could tease those out and teach everyone how to do that. So everyone gets to be the superhero that they're supposed to be. So yeah, the conversation, I've actually had a pretty deep conversation with him about that. So
Good. It's
interesting.
it's a it's a very untapped market. I can say it that way because I used to work security for a warehouse company. Me being me, I love talking to everyone, kind of thing. And the biggest one of the big executives, we'll call him like the district manager. This warehouse in particular I was working at was like his jumpstart, his baby that got him to where he is this big position now, making the 20K a month. Um, and by the way, he doesn't even look like he's making that much money. He just has a beaten up like Ranger. He wears like a blue polo. And you're like, you would assume he's just like some poor old guy left on the side of the road, but you don't realize he's making like a shit ton of money too. But so he came up to me one day and was like, "Hey Josh, something's wrong with the warehouse. The numbers are down." And I'm like, "Okay." He said, "Well, you're a very observant guy. What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, when you just pulled up and that guy that left," he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "He literally just said, I wish I got in a car crash and broke my legs so I didn't have to come to work." I'm like,
Hmm.
morale does not exist here anymore. Just saying morale has more value than what exists here.
Yeah, wow, that's a really insightful story there, right? If that person's not wanting to come to work, it is mounted to a fever pitch kind of, or
Mm-hmm.
to a breaking point. What was the lead up to that, and the I don't know the 385 days that led up to that point where, or
Right.
the through 5 years that led to that point where they say, I just don't give a flying flip anymore. They
And
weren't.
that's exactly what I told him. Like, you make a lot of money because me and him have talked before, and he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Would $100 a week really hurt you? Would it throw everything out of proportion?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "To them, $100 is the world. Buy him a gift card or give him cash, kind of thing." And I promise you, within so much time, it's going to increase. And I said, "But first one is just to see, test the water, chum it, kind of thing. Second one, make a rule. All right, I'm going to up the ante, $300, 3 people, but you all have to make sure the top three, kind of thing." And then I'm like, the week after that, I'm like, $1,000, but it's one of those, or you could just buy him a taco guy, same thing, and you get food. By the end of it, he was giving away about 500. He wanted the top five because it was like 15 people. So he's like, "I want to see, make sure a third of my boys are working correctly." The morale of that place went up so much in one maybe 2 months. It went from, let's say, I'll go like fake numbers, 100 shipments a day to 500 shipments a day.
Hmm.
And everyone's like, "What happened?" And they're now, all the managers are calling my little area. My morale, treat him like a human, not a robot.
Interesting. Treat him like a human, not a robot. I'm gonna quote Josh. Um,
Awesome captions.
that's right. That's a good story, and you said it happened actually in relatively short order, and wasn't. I mean, sure, there's some dollars involved, but it wasn't a gigantic sum of money. It doesn't sound like.
It sounded for him because I even told him, like, "What could you actually like lose right now that wouldn't hurt you?" He's like, 5,000. I'm like, "There you go. That is your fund for every month."
I'm capturing this. Treat him like humans, not a robot. I like it.
And it got to the point, actually, people were eager to go in early. They were literally calling each other out for shit. So because they're like, "You're not gonna mess up my $1,000, man. Fuck you. I'm gonna snitch on you." And
That's
then
funny.
literally,
They're starting to push each other.
yeah.
Huh.
And then when the taco guy came, literally, and it was just one of those, where I was working was an onslaught. Like literally, I had in 1 hour like 100 semi trucks in and out, and I had to balance between the two. Literally, the guy, the district manager, called my boss and said, "Get someone down here. Josh is eating the first taco because he fixed our warehouses." And they literally had to wait for like another 30 minutes to ensure I got the first batch.
Wow, that sounds like an honor to have been at the front of
Oh,
that line.
it totally was. And it's funny. I was a total gringo and they're all speaking Spanish. And I'm just like, "I don't know what you're saying. You could be cussing me out. I don't know what you're saying."
That's funny. Um so, there's a term that I don't feel like I hear very much anymore. It was really popular. I want to say like 5, 7 years ago, and the idea is gamification.
Yes.
I mean, that's basically what we're talking about here, right? Is they built some gamification into the system, and that changed the morale. It made it more enjoyable. Got their head back in the game.
Oh, 100%. And I did, and actually, now that you say it, I didn't even realize I was doing that. It's like, I was just thinking, what if my boss did something like that? And well, like, then hell yeah, I'd like crack and work as hard as I could. Cause it's like, I don't want to lose that bonus kind of thing.
Yeah,
So I just told him, like, that's what I would do. If you offered that price to me, I'd work really hard.
yeah. Um, gosh, so I'm on number 11. I've been getting lots of love.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Is that a
here's
record? Oh, he
uh,
is. He just
th-
held it up.
13 is my record. We're
All right.
pretty close, and we've got 10 minutes to go. So I'm sure we can squeeze out two
Oh,
more.
100%.
Give me drop some more on me.
All right. In what industry are you wanting or perspective and trends?
Just one that kind of give me one that surprised you that you just kind of didn't see coming. It kind of was counterintuitive. How's that?
Okay. It actually was the first one I ever learned doing the show. I had two CEOs, and at the time I was just like, "Oh my god, CEO kind of thing. Like this is the pinnacle." Now I'm just like, "Oh, okay, they're just like us." But um, essentially, the biggest one is especially the accountant guy. He essentially said like, "What people don't realize as a leader is kind of like this whole show. You're enabling people. You're winding them up. You're letting them go." But he's like, I actually, in my firm, I make it a point to know everyone, their personal things. He's like, there's a guy, we'll call him Jimmy for reasons. I don't want to actually say his name. I'm like, I get it. Whoever this Jimmy is, he's like, he's a bodybuilder. I don't know anything about weightlifting or eating carbs to protein ratio to get your mass up. He's like, but he was so passionate. He's like, now I understand the basics and I realize I'm not living a healthy lifestyle. But he's like, in doing so, he's like, I learned his stuff. He's like, not I never asked him to do this. He's actually gone off the clock to make sure a project's done because I made the time to learn who he is. So he went out of his way to make sure he helped me. And that sorry about that. That is the biggest one I've learned is like the treat them like a human, not a robot. Learn them, understand them. They have a name. They're not a number kind of thing.
So this is cool. I've got a number of books that I've already kind of plotted them all out and which I'm going to write. I'm giving myself about an 18 months to get I started in the first one, and one of them I call it's building your own amplifiers,
Mm-hmm.
building your own personal army. And the idea is that by leaning into others, they it endears them to you. And some of these people that I work with been working off the clock for me, and I was like, oh, no, I appreciate that. Charge me for it. They said, I don't do it because I want to charge you, and I do it because I like doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I can't tell you how much that means, and I think I'm hearing the same thing here, right? That
Right.
people don't realize that learning about others endears them to helping you in your goals, which is that's a great story.
It is. And it's the like we were leading into earlier. It's the let them be them and be the manager or in your case the business owner. You're just there to enable them. If they need a $10,000 software, great. Can you just give me a basic quirks of what it does? Oh, that's it. Great. Here, put it on the company credit card kind of thing. Get your job done if you need that. As compared to others who are like, oh, that's out of budget. It's like, but if you're saying that you can recoup it and within 6 months, it's not really a problem, kind of thing.
So, an analogy or story that I tell people all the time when I hire them is this idea that if you use a football analogy, which is what I use here,
Hmm.
there's two key players on a team. The one is the blocker and one is the quarterback. I am not the quarterback. I am the blocker.
Right.
Now, I will tell you, if you're going to go left, my job is to create a pocket to the left for you. And if you go right, my job is to create a pocket to the right. But you got to tell me, if you go left and you told me right and I go right and you get your clock clean, I can't help.
Right.
But the point is, I'm supposed to give you the space to play, not you give me the space to play. Uh, but I look fabulous as the blocker if every time you throw the ball, you've got this gigantic pocket from within which to operate, right?
Right.
So I think that's what I'm hearing here is a leader is more the blocker than they are the star player of the
Oh,
game.
100%. And that was the biggest one I've learned and realized. I'm like, wow. Everyone thinks, oh, they just sit there and crack their whips and as a CEO and get their stock options. Like, no, no, they're doing a lot of back work that people don't realize they're doing.
Yeah, someone told me that being the CEO is the loneliest job you'll ever have, and the reason why is because you can never share everything with anyone, right? Because
Mhm.
there's always politics. I mean, even within my company and the dozen plus people that we have, um, I can't talk about politics because that's really not fair to anybody else because I see it from a different perspective.
Right.
Um, but what I do is ask for a lot of perspectives of people because they see things from levels that I can't see. But it is it is a challenge sometimes. It is a lonely place to be.
That is another one that the things I didn't realize as an owner or even a CEO is pretty much everyone has told me like once you get high enough on the tree, there's really no one you can talk to. You are truly alone. They're like that's why CEOs like talking to CEOs because they can at least talk about something and they understand.
Yeah, I found an organization called EO Entrepreneurs Organization,
Okay.
which is I joined that about a year ago, and that is actually we've got my monthly meeting with my cohort of other owners of companies, and it's really just kind of a support group for them because they are not in your business. They're not going to touch your business. They're not in a competing business, but you can kind of tell them, like, gosh, I got this employee that I just don't know what to do with. How have you all dealt with it? And they give suggestions and feedback because ultimately it rests on your shoulders to make make the decision.
Right.
But going back to what you were saying earlier about getting as many perspectives as you can, here's 4 or 5 people who say, here's how I might approach it, or let me poke some holes in what you're thinking is there from my perspective, and you harden your perspective very very quickly, which is a
Yeah.
good thing to do.
The other thing I've always done it. I didn't realize it was a thing that people were scared to do. Is as a leader, be vulnerable and be like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of sucks. What do you think we should do?" And that is the biggest one everyone's told me. Like that is when literally people realize, "Oh, you are human, so we are gonna help you," kind of thing. He's like the whole ego thing. He's like that's what deters people. He's like if you just be straight up. He's like don't give too much detail. You obviously don't want to scare them all, but he's like just say, "Hey, this is going on. Little bit of a problem. Not sure how to fix it. What would you guys do?" He's like, that'll fix 90% of your problems right there.
There's a story that I'm going to share with you here.
Okay.
I went to a conference recently, and when I was at that conference, they did a session on stress reduction, and that's this kind of up my alley, just kind of internal awareness as a leader for myself. And they went around asking questions to get you out of your head and more sort of into your heart, into your feelings. And the question that they asked of everyone, it was we're sitting in a circle. There's probably 30 plus of us, and they asked the question, what brings you joy? And some people talk about music and their children and stuff. And I gotta tell you, I was probably number 20 in line, and I could feel it. I could feel it coming up, um, and it got to me where I couldn't. I mean, everyone's kind of 2 or 3, 4 seconds. They're kind of expressing what it is that they're thinking. I couldn't speak, and that's usually not a problem for me. I couldn't speak. I just couldn't get words out. And then eventually something comes out, but it just, uh, I don't even know that it was anywhere close to a real sound. It was just kind of like this guttural noise, right? Yeah. Uh, and it took me, so I'm now 20 seconds in and I can't speak. And I've actually started to tear up quite a bit. I mean, it's, and I finally get it out that it was my youngest son that brings me a lot of joy just because of the context of the situation around him.
Mhm.
And I was like, gosh, I have a bunch of people in this room that I've never talked to, who don't know who the heck I am. And they just saw me kind of break down in front of them. I was like, oh boy, I'm never going to be invited back. And I can't tell you the number of people that came over to me and they're like, I'm so glad you were in the room with me. And I was like, huh, that's exactly the opposite of what I thought was going to happen. It was a little awkward at the moment. Right?
Yeah.
but, but 10 minutes later, I was like, huh, there was a reason for that. And it just kind of endeared those people to me because they saw that not some person who sits up all high and mighty on my pedestal. There's things that I feel as well. So yeah, I felt that point. So Uh, Josh, I'm putting this last one. So that was number 14.
Heck yeah.
The so I got a lot out of this session, and first I want to kind of thank Ravi for chiming in, and all the others who may have been listening in. Thank you for being and listening. Hopefully there was a really you got something out of this. Josh, thank you. You definitely dropped a lot of really good points that I've at some point in time thought of myself, but may not have necessarily ever written down. So thanks for taking me through a tour of what you've learned.
My pleasure. That's what I'm here to help. Wow, I can't talk
Um,
today.
I appreciate it, Josh. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just for anyone who was listening in, if you want to see the replay of this, it is on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube as of right now. You can go in and find it. Or LinkedIn in the next couple of weeks, you'll see some snippets and posts and little sound bites from here. And you'll also see it pushed out to Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Deezer, and a couple of other platforms as well. So thank you all for listening and taking some time to listen to Josh drop some knowledge on us. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.